Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be showing you a couple of exciting additions to my collection of vintage Seiko dress watches. I've been on a bit of a dress watch kick since my last video, in particular the classic era King and Grand Seikos of the 1960s and early 1970s. Now I guess I have at the back of my mind that I'm buying these as research for a possible book, but the truth is that I really just love the stripped back aesthetic of these silver dial dress watches. It's amazing to see the range of case designs and movements that Seiko used in the watches of this era. Everything from low beat 18,000 beat per hour manual wind movements to automatic 28,800 and 36,000 beat per hour high beats. And all of this in pursuit of the best and most accurate practical watch that was possible to make. One of the reasons I wanted to do some videos of these watches is that they seem to be a bit overlooked in terms of YouTube videos. I think the relative scarcity of the vintage KS and GS watches in Western markets, combined with the popularity of vintage divers and chronographs, means that they haven't really received the attention that they deserve. Outside of short clips of some watches running and videos of watches for sale at Japanese dealer sites, there really isn't anything out there that discusses these pieces in any great detail. So to the subjects of this video. The two watches that we are looking at are historically significant to the Grand Seiko line because they represent firsts for the brand. In the first instance, we have the watch that introduced the grammar of design concept invented by Taro Tanaka, the 44GS. Taro Tanaka started his career with Seiko in 1959, and he was in fact the first person hired by the company with a college degree in design. Apparently, Seiko didn't have a design department at all before 1956, and even after that time they were only responsible for the look of the dials, while the cases were designed by another department. Tanaka's aim was to take a more holistic approach to the design of the product, and to make watches that were distinctive to Seiko, so that they would stand out in a display case next to the competition. To that end, by 1962 he had come up with a set of design rules inspired by gem cutting that Seiko referred to as the grammar of design. This can be broken down into 4 principles. Firstly, all surfaces of the watch, from the case, dial, indices and hands, should be flat and geometrically perfect to perfectly reflect light. Secondly, bezels should feature simple, two-dimensional faceted curves. Thirdly, no visual distortions were allowed when viewing the case from any angle, and the surfaces would be polished to a mirror finish. And finally, all cases should be unique. No more pedestrian, boring round case designs. The improvement in Seiko products were twofold. Not only did the watches become more distinctive, but the tighter tolerances required by the complex case designs and finishes led to an improvement in the manufacturing quality of the products. As the amount of finishing required increased the production costs of the product, the design change started with the higher end of more expensive Grand Seiko and King Seiko ranges, and through the early 1970s filtered down to the Lordmatics and Seiko 5 ranges, and even into the early automatic chronographs, and the 6105 and 6309 divers. So, let's talk a little bit about the first GS to benefit from this design overhaul, the 4420-9000 or 44GS. The 44GS evolved out of the 44 King Seiko chronometer watches developed by the Diani factory. Diani were primarily responsible for the King Seiko line, which was an internal competitor to the Suwa-produced Grand Seiko watches. The change from King Seiko chronometer to Grand Seiko occurred in the mid-1960s when the Swiss Commission Internationale des Contrôles Chronométriques, or CICC, ruled that Seiko could no longer label their watches as chronometers because there was no independent testing agency inside Japan. In response, Seiko initiated the Grand Seiko certification process that had a tighter testing limit than the COSC. Some watches, like the 44 King Seiko and Seikomatic chronometers, were rebranded as Grand Seiko at that time. In 1969, the Japanese Chronometer Association was established as an independent authority, and Seiko could again market watches as officially certified chronometers. So I bought this watch from a local collector about 2 weeks ago. It's one of those watches that I was really very happy to get. One that I never thought I would have the opportunity to own. But he offered it to me at a really great price, so I sold a couple of my other pieces to fund it, and I haven't regretted it for a second. So as you can see, this is the second version of the Grand Seiko 44GS with the dial down the bottom without the Diashock text on it. Let's see if I can get the focus a bit better for you there. There we go. So it just has the Grand Seiko logo, the Grand Seiko text, and the Diani factory lightning bolt symbol at the bottom there. Because this, of course, was still made at the Diani factory. It was the first Grand Seiko that they produced. The watch itself is in really nice condition. As you can see, it has been polished, but it's been done well. The case retains all of its nice sharp lines, its high polish finish there. One of the things I noticed about this watch when I received it was it had a domed crystal on it that was quite different from the other ones that I'd seen online. So I assume that was probably a replacement that was maybe done when the watch was serviced last year. But I was lucky enough to find through a supplier that I get a lot of my parts from in the UK a new old stock Seiko glass for this. You can see the quite sort of sharp edges to the glass there, which really matches the Grammar of Design case style. So in terms of the movement inside here, as I mentioned, it's a 4420 low beat movement, so it ticks at 18,000 beats per hour. And Grand Seiko certified, of course, so it conforms to the accuracy standards for the Grand Seiko standard at that time, which was -3 to +6 seconds a day. Now this was, of course, serviced last year by the person that owned it before the person that I bought it from. And it keeps time to about +2 seconds a day, so it's pretty good for a watch that's knocking on the door of 50 years old. This one being made in 1968. So I'll open up the strap. I've got a Grand Seiko strap on here with a reproduction Seiko buckle. That's the one that I think was used for the 44GS reissues from a couple of years back. And there we can see the case back in really nice condition. Good medallion. All of the text in the horseshoe there still in very good condition. February 1968 production, this particular one. So in terms of wearing the watch, it's a very comfortable watch to wear. It's 37mm across, so it's quite big for its day compared to the other Grand Seiko watches like the 62GS that we'll be looking at. It's a beautiful watch to wind as well, and to hear it running that beautiful 18,000 beat per hour movement sounds like an old pocket watch ticking away. So it's quite a big watch compared to the other Grand Seikos of its era, and bigger than the 45GS, which is essentially a high beat version of this same watch, very similar in terms of its case look. So when you view the case here, you can see from the end there, looking at the strap end, you can really see that Grammar of Design case shape. So very distinctive look to it, the sharp edge crystal, the very simple lines of the bezel there, cut back in, back out again for the case sides, and then back in again down to the wrist, and that high polish finish that catches the light beautifully as well. It's still a very fresh looking design even today. I mean, it must have been just a mind-blowing thing to see from Seiko back in the 1960s. And of course this design, Grammar of Design concept is still used in the Grand Seikos made today. Yeah, just a really beautiful piece of design. So, setting the 44GS aside for the moment, we move on to the next watch that we're going to have a look at. This is another new arrival for me. It's the 6245-9001 or 62GS. And of course this is an important watch from Grand Seiko history point of view because it's the first automatic model that they released. And Seiko emphasized that fact by placing the crown here at 4 o'clock. It's recessed into the side of the case. The inference being that the watch wound itself. You didn't have to wind it every day, so the crown didn't need to be as prominent as it had been on the earlier watches. And as mentioned before, of course, this watch evolved out of the Seiko Matic chronometer watches that were in production at the time. And I have one of those watches here. I don't have a chronometer rated version in my collection, but I do have a non-chronometer which shares the same case and dial design. So you can see the family resemblance there between the 6218 Seiko Matic and the 6245 Grand Seiko. Very similar sort of case shapes, a bit more refined in the GS version perhaps, but a definite family resemblance there. Just both beautiful looking dials, of course, as well. So setting that one aside, we'll go back and have a look a bit more at the 62. So this actually only arrived with me about 2 days ago. I was lucky enough to snag it off a Japanese auction site. It's in pretty good original condition, actually. I was very happy when it arrived. It's another watch, a little bit like the 44, that was a bit of a grail that I never thought I'd have an opportunity to own. But again, this one came up at a good price, so I managed to snag it. So you can see the case is in original condition. It's been obviously worn quite a bit. There's no major case damage though, no major dinks on any of the surfaces. It doesn't look like it's ever been polished. So it retains all its original lines in very nice condition. Can't really say the same for the glass on this particular watch. As you can see, it's got quite a big stress fracture right across the top there above the 5-pass marker. There's another one along the edge of the crystal down the bottom here as well. It's not surprising, these older plexis, they get a little bit brittle as they get older, so no great surprises there. But again, lucky enough to find a new old stock plexi for this off a seller on eBay, so that's on its way in now, so that's going to improve the look of the watch a lot. Underneath the fairly rough crystal though, there's a really nice original dial, good handset as well, so it's going to be quite a handsome piece when it's all restored. Have a look at the case back. It's just on a rather nasty generic strap at the moment, but I have a proper grand Seiko 19mm leather strap and a similar buckle to the 44GS on order for it at the moment, so it's going to look really nice. I mean, you pretty much have to splash out for a watch like this. It really needs to be on an original strap as well. So you can see the case back, it's not too bad. The medallion has a little bit of wear through. They tend to wear like this, they lose the high points on the medallions as they've been worn. But the rest of the text is on there, it's still quite clear, it hasn't sort of worn through at all. This particular watch, a 67. So it sits a little bit earlier in terms of the grammar of design, case shape compared to the 44GS, but you can see the general idea is starting to evolve. So my plan with this watch is to do a bit of a restoration on it. Now, in terms of its timekeeping, it's a slightly higher beat movement than the 44GS. It's a 19,800 beat per hour movement, this one. It's a little bit dirty when I open the case up. It obviously hasn't been serviced recently, but there's no major damage or anything to the movement itself, no major scratches. It's consistently losing time in position, and beat error is pretty good. So I think all up it's going to service pretty well. The only thing I did notice in terms of cosmetics with the movement, it's a bit brassed around the edges of the main plate. Tends to suggest that the bearings for the automatic rotor are a little bit worn, but I've again managed to find new old stock one of that from the same supplier the guy got the 44GS glass from. So I'll replace that as well. So in the lead up to the arrival of this watch, I did actually service the Seiko Matic that you saw earlier. It's the first one of those movements that I've done. It's a little bit more complex than the 6105s and 6309s that I've done before, particularly around the keyless works. There seems to be like 4 times as many parts in the keyless works of these watches compared to the 6309s. The other thing that's different with these higher end watches is the use of Diafix settings. Now, Diafix is a system that Seiko invented. It's essentially a system to keep the oils on the escape wheel and third wheel in these watches free from contaminants, so the oil that lasts longer. It's a cap jewel with a little lyre spring over the top of it, which are quite fiddly to remove, and they can disappear on your quick smart. So I found when I was servicing the Seiko Matic that if I put the watch in the movement in a movement holder inside a plastic baggie and put my tweezers in through the end, if anything does sort of try and escape, it's caught by the baggie. So it saves a lot of time scuffing around on your knees trying to find parts when they go missing. So what I'm going to do is a series of videos on the restoration process of this watch. So place the glass, clean the case and do a light polish with a Cape Cod, fresh case back and crown seals, and a full movement overhaul. I'll do videos as I go of that process for you to have a look at, and you can see this beauty come back to its original condition. So there we go, a video of the 62GS in original condition but ready for restoration, and of course this glorious 44GS, which is really the sort of I guess the high watermark of my collection at the moment. Just a beautiful piece. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we'll have some videos on the 62GS coming up really soon. Thanks very much.